and I'm going to file for exceptions. And exceptions are, there's 4 in the Pennsylvania code that you're allowed to file for. 1, 2 deal with grandfathered debt. We don't qualify for that. The third deals with pension increases, and the pension rate has gone down, so we won't qualify for that either. So, and the fourth is special ed costs, and I'll show you those special ed costs in a second. We do qualify for exceptions for special ed rising costs, and I've quantified that. And an exception says, and again, no decision binds you to any of this. An exception says the board is able to raise taxes above 4.8% to roughly 6.2%. There's a dollar figure associated with that, 423,000 above it based on our calculations. If you choose to pass a preliminary budget and go down this road, it means you can do anything between 0 and 6.2%. It doesn't bind you to any tax rate at all. It just gives you more options with regard to what you want to do with your taxing authority. The deadline to do this is, so the first deadline is we have to make a preliminary budget available to the public. Technically, we can, if we were all good to go, we can make this available to the public tomorrow, technically. The deadline to give notice to the public that you're going to adopt it is February 5th, okay? And the deadline to pass this is, to adopt it is February 15th. Practically speaking, I believe we should be looking at January 18th to make this decision, because if you don't pass a resolution, you are opting to pass a preliminary budget. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So is everyone clear on what the options are and what they mean? Okay. So it's really a binary choice, and it's clearly laid out in the Act 1, the Pennsylvania Code. And so these are the 2 choices that you have. So here's what the Act 1 index, going to the Act 1 index, means to the median taxpayer in Abington Heights. 4.8% is about $122 on the median tax bill. There are other measures we can get. We're working with the county to try to get some better data so we can sort of stratify the population so that folks can sort of quantify this a little bit better than the median. But this is one metric as what the middle looks like. Referendum exceptions I spoke about. Here is the basis for a referendum exception. Essentially what you do is you say, how much did your special ed costs go up from year to year? These are actual costs. These aren't budgeted costs. These aren't projected. Actual costs year over year. Our special ed costs went up by $771,000 year over year. You then also have to look at the revenue that increased with regard to special ed. And I believe I've made it a little bit too small to take a look at here. But the difference between the 2 is the exception that is available to you should you choose to pursue it. And that exception to go above the Act 1 index is $423,529. Those are your options. Here's what they mean in terms of revenue generated and additional revenue at each step of the way. You can see no tax increase, raised to index, raised to exceptions. And of course, there are numbers all the way in between, but those are the various outcomes of what the revenue generated look like. And then here is what those real estate outcomes look like in terms of a projected budget and how a final deficit would look. If this budget were to become final, that is what your deficit would look like. We know this budget will not be final because there are many changes to be made between now and then. So the next steps are to decide which option to pursue. And then we would vote on either an early budget or an Act 1 resolution on January the 18th. And then, of course, we would continue to present and discuss budget information and provide updates. And then I just want to reinforce changes can be made and will be made until late June of 2023. It's just we heard you. We wanted to get started early. And here we are. We're getting started early. And here are some options that you have along the way when you do start early. Any questions?
Okay. Mr. Rinaldi, can you explain the special ed exemption? If we were to raise taxes for above the index with that exception, do those funds have to stay in the special ed department?
They don't.
Have we ever used the exception? Have we ever applied for exceptions?
We've never passed an early budget. We've never applied for an exception. We've calculated what they may be, but we've never pursued them, no.
I know this isn't your department, but why is it that our special ed costs are so expensive?
Well, there, I mean, I can tell you this is not an Abington Heights problem. This is kind of an everywhere problem. The cost of doing business is going up, and you can see that it's very evident in the monthly bills I receive from some of our placements that we send students to. A placement that used to be $30,000 is now $45,000 annually, and it's a lot more expensive to do business with these folks, and no one's come in with a creative way to provide those services at a lower cost yet.
If I can answer your question more specifically, on November 16th, I had a presentation where I talked about some of the headwinds that would be in front of us, and particular to special education. So over the past decade, there's been a 15% increase in the special education subsidy revenue. And there's been an 827% increase in special education tuition costs. Along that same 10 years, there's been a 43% increase in special education enrollment. And that has led to, as Jim had mentioned, there was a net $818,000 increase in special education expenditures. So we have seen disproportionality with what we were spending versus what we were receiving. And on top of that, we've seen a 43% increase in the number of students.
So why, if it's a special ed exemption for us to raise funds for special ed, why is it not allocated only for special ed? Is that just the way the system, the state has allowed districts to apply for exceptions?
I'm sorry. I think clearly that this process allows you to demonstrate a need that you are experiencing a hardship based on something, right? And the only thing that we are able to apply for is a special ed exemption, and we certainly are seeing a hardship there. There's a year lag on this, by the way. So I think they view it as being able to replace some revenue there, perhaps.
And one other question: if we were to raise to the index, what number is that? How much money is that for the district?
Yeah, so you can see there the middle line, $1,345,000 is the index, and then the additional funds, the $423,000 below there is the exemption amount.
So that would be the max amount, the exception amount, right?
The total of the two, the 1.77 would be the absolute max. Yes.
Thank you.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Mirabelli. While you don't have to spend the funds from an exception specifically on special education, the fact that the special education cost is going up by that amount, what's really going to happen is those funds are going to cover those costs although you may not be specifically targeting them to a specific project.
Thank you for saying it much more succinctly than I did. I appreciate that. Yes.
I understood though.
Any other questions?
Mr. Azar has.
Mr. Azar?
So I'm pretty sure I got this right. I just want to confirm. All we're deciding this month is whether we're going to maintain the option to do something. If we decide to pass a preliminary budget, that's going to give us more options, but it's not going to obligate us to do anything, right? And if
Correct.
we don't do that, we're going to have less options.
Correct.
Right. Okay. Thanks.
Other questions? Mr. Mirabelli, thank you very much, and thank you for your good work. Dr. Schaefer, anything else this time?
No.
Okay. The next part of our agenda then would be for public comment. I believe we have two speakers that have requested to come before us. The first is Mr. Joe Durkin for the wastewater treatment plant. Mr. Durkin, if I'm not mistaken, I mentioned 2003 because I believe you have a daughter that graduated in 2003 as well. She unfortunately went to another school, but I have no doubt she probably was part of a chorus or something. And I'm just wondering,
She was a singer.
maybe it runs in your family. You'd like to sing a song for us.
My daughter actually enjoyed singing, was actually pretty good at it. And someone asked her once, "Did you get that talent from your father?" She said, "Does he like to sing?" And she says, "He's enthusiastic." So, it does not come down from me or my side of the family. But it was nice. You start every meeting like that. That's great. I have a few handouts, so I'm going to hand those out. They're a little bit of a packet, but I won't be going through them in a lot of detail. I just want to sort of catch you up on where we are and what we've been doing. And for those of you who haven't seen me before, I'll introduce myself. So my name is Joe Durkin. I'm the Vice President with Riley Associates. We're an engineering firm. Our main office is in Pittston. Our other offices are in Stroudsburg and Scranton. I actually grew up in Clark's Green, and my mom still lives in Clark's, where I just was a few minutes ago eating pea soup. So I'm here all the time. The reason I'm here in front of the board is that we have been hired by the Department of General Services in the Commonwealth to help them with a project to upgrade and replace their wastewater treatment plant out at Clark's State Hospital. That plant was built originally in the 1950s. It's well past its useful life and needs to be replaced in order to be operable to handle the sewage from the hospital. And in fact, the only other connection to that plant is the middle school and the township school. So the last time I was in front of you, I think we were talking about a couple of different options. We were looking at building a new treatment plant. We were also looking at an interconnection with Arwa. So the first, or maybe the second item on my agenda is to simply tell you the status of the Arwa option is there is no longer an interconnection option. We spent well over a year with Arwa, their engineer, the board. They formed a subcommittee that looked at connections. They looked at their treatment facility. We went around and talked to a number of municipalities. And eventually we just came to the conclusion that it was not going to be feasible to make that interconnection. So where we are in the process is we are now going down the road of doing a wastewater treatment plant on the site. Preliminary to that has been what we call an I&I study, inflow and infiltration. And what that refers to is every sewer system in the world leaks. So, gravity collection system, especially older systems, and water leaks into those systems. So when you have a rainfall event, you get direct runoff or you get indirect runoff from groundwater seeping into the system, and you wind up with a large surge of water in addition to your sewage coming from your facilities, winding up with the wastewater treatment plant. And that's one of the things that occurs with this plant. So we did a fairly in-depth study and came to the conclusion that there were a number of things that the hospital was going to do at their site. They've opted to do even more in-depth studies. We're doing sort of a phase 2 of that I&I to try to identify in a more targeted fashion some of these things. We probably identified about 40 different items we're going to fix or repair at the site, and we're going to do some more testing and metering and some video inspections and paint events to identify some areas. They'll probably spend between $500,000 and $1 million on their repairs. And the purpose of this is preliminary to the wastewater treatment plant because you don't want to be treating clean water. You don't want to be treating rainwater and groundwater at the treatment plant. It's inefficient, it's environmentally not useful, and it's expensive because you have to size all of your treatment equipment, you have to size all of your tanks, and waste chemicals treatment this clean water. So the purpose is to get that water out, and so we'll continue to do that process. And one of the reasons I wanted to come and speak to you tonight is that their actions are probably something we need to look at also. Because in the process of doing the M&I study, we did also put meters on the schools lines that come down. If you're familiar at all, and where the school campus is, if you see the treatment plant, it's right at the bottom of the hill in front of the hospital. There is a sewer line that runs from your schools down to that treatment plant. That sewer line is actually owned by the school district. It was constructed by the school district in 72, 73, when the middle school was built. And you guys own that. At one point, you approached the township to see if they would take that over. They did a preliminary study, determined that this is in 93. They did a preliminary study with the determination that there were defects in the sewer system. They didn't want to take it over. They never have. There was a subsequent lawsuit regarding the ownership of that sewer, and the courts determined that still is the ownership of that sewer district. So that sewer system is yours. Just in terms of schedule, in terms of what's going on, this second phase of the I&I that we're doing for Clark Summit State Hospital will take us through next year, and the repairs will take us into 2024. So we don't actually expect to be doing the wastewater treatment plant design until late 2024 to 2025. We'll be doing design and permitting, and 2025 doing construction. Probably take us into 2026 to give you an idea of what that project looks like. The first handout that I put in your packet is labeled Appendix E, just because it was part of the report that we provided to the state. This is amendment number 2 for the 1974 agreement, and I have a copy that I'll be happy to leave here. You look at it, have your solicitors look at it. But the 1974 agreement was the agreement between the state and Newton Township for accepting sewage. Essentially, the sewage from the school. It's the only customer that's ever been accepted. That agreement was amended once by amendment number 1, which allowed the use of water meter records from the water company to be utilized instead of a sewage meter. And amendment number 2 is actually when Abington School District itself signed up to the agreement. So you're actually a party to that sewage treatment agreement as of 1993. So that's why I provided in your packet just a copy of that. And if you turn to the third page of that, there's a little red box and sort of the top of the page. And it references capital expenditures and major component repairs at the plant and how those will be incorporated into the rate increases that will go to the school. I think we talked about that the last time I was here, which was a while back, whether that's financed through an annual rate or whether you want to look at financing some of that up front. That would make your annual rates lower. Those are all financial questions for later on. There will be undoubtedly revisions to these agreements that the state will come and want to negotiate with you, with the township, in order to update them to where we are today. These are 50-year-old agreements. So I'm just providing that for some information. Like I said, I have the original 74 agreement and the First Amendment and the Second Amendment. I have a copy here that I'm happy to leave this here. The next thing I just wanted to point out to you, just so you have some understanding of what we did when we looked at some of the records. We went back and we looked through the water records for the campus. We went back into 2016 and pulled the records and we averaged them out. We looked at them also during the period that we had meters in the lines, the sewer lines, where we were monitoring the sewage flow, so that we could get a comparison of water records as compared to sewage flow. So interestingly enough, maybe it's interesting for the engineer here, your water flow per capita per student is very consistent over the time frame. It's about 5.3 to 6 gallons per capita per day during the school day. That averaged out during the period in 2021, which obviously was a pandemic impacted period, of about 6,000 gallons a day. You average 100,000 gallons plus per month. But if you keep in mind that 6,000 gallons per day number, if you turn to the next page and look at these charts, I know there's the cheater glasses, it's going to be tough to interpret. But if you take a step back, I can give you just a quick look at tell you what they are. The chart on the top is the green line is the measurement of the sewage flow that comes from your sewer line right before it enters the Clarksville State Hospital system. And the left-hand vertical axis is the gallons per day in the sewage flow. So we talked about averaging 6,000 or 7,000 gallons a day in water records. The actual sewage flows, that axis, the bottom number on the axis, the origin is 0, and the top green line you see is 60,000 gallons a day. So when you look across that line, you'll see that sort of in the middle of the period, it's averaging about 10,000 during rain events. Those blue bars correspond to rain events. We were measuring, we had an automated rain meter that measures the daily flow rate, the daily rainfall rate. That's actually plotted on the right-hand axis, and that runs from 0 to 2 inches. So those blue bars you see are a daily amount of flow for a rainfall event. And you can see what's going on is that when you have no rainfall in the middle of the period, you get low sewer rates. As you get to the right-hand side of that chart, what you'll see when you have a lot more rain, you'll see that the amount of sewage that's coming out of the school district's sewer line and being transported to the wastewater treatment plant goes up significantly. Roughly speaking, during dry periods, your flow is about 4,500 gallons a day. During the entire period, the average is about 15,000 gallons a day. So the average increase during the wet period is about 10,000 gallons per day. So that 15,000 gallons is almost 3 times your water rate, the amount of water you're putting into the system. The chart on the bottom is a similar chart, just taken at a different place. It's actually taken at a manhole that's near the pond up on the campus. And again, sort of a similar effect as you can, this is for a shorter period of time, it's for the month of August. As you get towards the right-hand side of the chart, there's a few larger rainfall events, and you can see that next page. This is just a picture with some notes on it inside that manhole that we're talking about, 190. If you actually open that manhole up, you can see the water coming in through that manhole, through the joints around the pipes. So this is something that your whole system is sort of something you need to get your engineers to take a look at. Needs to be studied. These sources of infiltration you should identify and eliminate, because ultimately your charges in the wastewater treatment plant are going to be related to how much water you're putting into the plant. And you don't want to be getting charged for putting groundwater into the plant. So this is just a specific example of one of the things we found. The next page is just a little bit of a close-up. It's a little hard to see on this actually. Video, if anybody's interested in seeing it with me. If you turn to this third page, or this next page, we see that denim light going underneath the manhole there. This is one of your manholes on your system. It's at a ground level. It's actually loose. There's about a 6-inch gap in there. So when you rain water, anytime there's a rainstorm, that water would run right under that lid and directly into your sewer system. Also noted that there are holes in that lid. Same thing. That lid system, any kind of compressed area or any kind of drainage ditch, the water's going to run through those holes in the sewer system. Next page, there's a manhole with green X on it. Same sort of thing. Loose manhole, running loose lids, holes in the lid. 47, that's probably the manhole you want to clean out. They don't usually look like that. There are a lot of debris in there. And the last page, I just repeated something that I referred to originally in the 93 report that was done by Mills Engineering on behalf of the township at the time we were looking to see if the township would take over the sewer line. And we do not have that report, and we don't have, we're trying to get it, and we don't have access to any of these old television records that were done at that time. We just have reference to what that report included. We downloaded some of the court records with lawsuit that had gone on. There was a reference to the report and reference to its conclusions. So I think the message I'm trying to bring is probably to take a look at that system and have some engineering and do some repairs on that we want to have done ahead of what's going to be coming when we get to a connection.
Mr. Durkin, would it be your advice for the school district to hire, and I'm not suggesting your firm at all, but
Definitely.
an engineering firm or someone to go through that whole line and identify the sources of rainwater intrusion and help us seal them?
Yes, yeah.